Now, most lifters choose between getting strong or building size. Today, I'm introducing my new 5-day power building template called RESOLUTE that is intended to do both at the same time. You'll learn how 3-week rep range rotations can keep you progressing without plateaus, why starting every session with your heaviest main lift maximizes gains, and how dedicating one full day to specialization can accelerate your overall development. Welcome to Wits and Weights, the show that helps you build a strong, healthy physique using evidence, engineering, and efficiency. I'm your host, Philip Pape, and today I'm sharing something that I've been developing for a while behind the scenes. It is called RESOLUTE, and it is my new 5-day power building template designed to maximize both strength and size or muscle growth simultaneously. It's available exclusively inside Wits and Weights Physique University, but today I want to break down the principles behind it and why it works and how you can apply these concepts to your own training. If you want RESOLUTE, as mentioned, it's available only inside Physique University, which you can join for just $27 a month using the link for podcast listeners in the show notes. And if you use that link, I'll build out your custom nutrition plan for free. You'll be able to grab the template, get any of our other templates, learn how to use them, and get support as you make adjustments or substitutions or deal with your own personal limitations, whether it's equipment, physical, or otherwise. So last month I had a call with someone, I'm going to call him Mike. Mike had been lifting for about 3 years. So he was kind of on the intermediate level of training, and he had been constantly switching programs, bouncing between programs every few months or so. It wasn't like every week, but it was every few months he would go from a powerlifting program and get a bit stronger with his numbers, but then he wanted to improve his physique, so he'd switch to bodybuilding and he'd build some muscle there, but then some of his main lifts would stagnate. He didn't feel like he was really making overall progress. And I think that problem isn't unique. It's the inevitable result of how, not only how programs are designed, but how people think they need to apply specific programs at specific times that may not be right for them. And what you really want to do is treat strength and hypertrophy, not like oil and water, like they're completely separate things, but there's a massive overlap. We talked about this in the strength versus hypertrophy episode, and people get stuck in their head that I'm either training for strength, powerlifting, max numbers, peak intensity, or I'm training for size, and that you have to pick a lane every time. And I think the research shows that for practical purposes, for everyday people just trying to do both, because we tend to have both of those desires. I mean, I will talk to people who just don't care about their strength whatsoever, but that's rare. The research shows that these are not opposing forces, and that if you can get stronger, it's going to give you size. If you can build some size, it's going to help push up your strength. And there's periodization between these. They're synergistic, but there's also a way to do them concurrently in many cases. The stronger you are, right, the more weight you can use for the hypertrophy work. So wouldn't it be interesting if you're getting strong while also applying that to hypertrophy? The more muscle you then have, the better your leverage is, the stronger you become. Most likely you're probably eating to gain a bit of weight as well. And so you can take the muscle size that you're building and feed it back into your main lifts and getting stronger. So instead of trying to optimize them separately, which for some people will take longer, cause more frustration, and also is almost too optimal, if you will, right? For the everyday person who's just going to work out 4 days a week, maybe in their home gym, or maybe they only have an hour. You can design one system where they enhance the other as you go along. And I've learned this from some of the best out there, including my current coach, Andy Baker. We see it in different applications of strength development, including in the powerlifting world, where they understand that becoming well-rounded and hitting your weak spots then translates to strength. So the program I put together is a little bit of a blend of the best of what I've learned from some of these other coaches. Again, it's called RESOLUTE. And in that plan, the idea is that you can go for quite a while and push your main lifts at moderate strength levels while also making your hypertrophy work more effective, and then vice versa, back and forth, virtuous cycle. And the whole thing is sustainable because you rarely need deloads the way it's designed with resets and waves. So I think it's, I'll admit it, I'm standing on the shoulder of giants here, but I've also put these things in practice myself and worked with clients who have tried them, and I'm taking the best of all these together and designing this with a both and approach. So we're going to talk about the main pieces of the program. And these are things you could do on your own. You don't have to join us to get the program or to get the template. But if you do, it'll be all prescribed, spelled out nicely. And I even include in the template a starter set of all the lifts. In other words, you could run those lifts as is almost indefinitely. And I put it into Boost Camp. So you'll get a link where if you want to use Boost Camp, the workout app, it's preloaded in there for 12 weeks, right? So the main thing there is the first lift of the day. This is a 3-week rep range. And I stole this idea from concepts like Jim Wendler 531, from Andy Baker's KSC Powerbuilding, which is an 852. And what I'm doing here is having you work in rep ranges, but also rotate those reps. So week 1, you're working in the 6 to 8 rep range. Week 2 in the 3 to 5 rep range. Week 3 in the 2 to 3. And I like the ranges in this case. It gives you a little bit more of that auto regulation rather than absolutely having to progress on a certain rep range. It gives you some auto regulation, gives you a little more flexibility for some of the bumps and bruises and dings and recovery issues that we face. Also makes it a little bit easier to run during fat loss because a lot of our students are trying to do this during fat loss. So it gives you a little more allowance to be able to push the weight up, even if you say drop a rep, as long as you're still in the rep range and you're pushing those rep ranges independently over the 3 weeks later, right? So the 6 to 8 rep range, you're going to push it up 3 weeks later in terms of weight. You're going to keep pushing it up until you drop below the rep range, and then you're going to do a reset. That's really it. And you're going to do that. You're going to do that independently for each rep range. So if your 2 to 3 reps is driving up, but your 3 to 5 reps drops, the 3 to 5 reps gets reset. The 2 to 3 reps keeps going, right? And all of this is explained in words in the template itself. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's just periodization. But I don't think it is. I think traditional periodization moves you through phases linearly, right? You spend like 4 to 6 weeks in one rep range and then you move to another. I think 5-3-1 is built on that. And part of the problem there is by the time you cycle back to a rep range or a specific number of reps, you might have lost some of the training or adaptations that you built there. And for my client base and those of you listening, most of you are beginner, novice, intermediate, late intermediate, as opposed to more advanced trainees. And I think this kind of weekly system will progress you better because you can you can get higher frequency. I hope I'm not losing you guys in explaining all this. Okay, it's all spelled out in the template if you join Physique University. So when if you stop providing a stimulus to a particular rep range, you're going to slowly start detraining in that rep range, which is not always a terrible thing if you're still getting the movement pattern in within other rep ranges, but this kind of splits the difference and helps you do both, right? You do 6 to 8 reps, then you do 3 to 5, then you do 2 to 3, and now you're back to 6 to 8 just 3 weeks later, and you've kept the movement pattern going in the meantime. And the different rep ranges help the other rep ranges, right? So you are never more than 2 weeks away from a rep range. Your adaptations stay fresh. Your strength stays kind of where it needs to be. And at the same time, you're building some size. And I think there's research that shows this kind of approach is really solid. Hey, this is Philip, and before we continue, I want to talk about cookware. We all love to make our own food. I love non-stick pans. The problem is I've avoided them for years because when they get scratched, when they get heated, they can release microplastics, PFAS, small particles that can accumulate over time in the body, and some studies have shown them to be linked to health issues. If you're optimizing your nutrition and making lots of food for you and your family at home, it doesn't make sense to compromise that with questionable cookware. So that's why I was interested when Chef's Foundry, who is sponsoring this episode, showed me their ceramic cookware. It's called the P600 and uses Swiss-engineered ceramic coating, which has no Teflon, no PFAS, no plastic components. It is non-stick. It works on all stovetops. It goes straight into the oven. All the things you need if you're trying to cook a lot of your meals at home. Right now, you can get the P600 at 50% off by going to witsandweights.com/chefsfoundry. You'll also get a bunch of accessories with that. There's a whole page that explains what you'll get for that discounted 50% off. Go to witsandweights.com/chefsfoundry or click the link in the show notes. All right, let's get back to the show. Mike Zordos and their colleagues showed that undulating periodization, which is varying the intensity in shorter time frames, is going to produce superior strength gains compared to a linear progression. This assumes you've gotten through your novice linear progression. it also produces better hypertrophy because you're using heavier loads more frequently, right? So it's a combination of the heavier and lighter loads and the rotation. Every session in Resolute starts with a big barbell movement. When you're fresh, squat, bench, dead, overhead, the 4 main lifts. It's 4 days. That's 4 of the 5 days. So stay tuned. I'll explain what the 5th day is. And that's kind of an intelligent design to push all those lifts up and to accessorize around them. You have only so much energy, only so much focus and strength in each session, right? Some of you are doing this during fat loss, so you have even less. And a lot of programs will scatter this across multiple exercises where like the squat is sandwiched between leg press and lunge, or if you're talking full body, or the bench comes after 3 other pressing movements. And it's, again, it depends on your goal. If your goal is to work on weak spots and variations, that might need to come first before you hit the main lift. But Resolute, it's power building. So we're prioritizing what matters most, and that's the most neurologically demanding lift. And that gets you in your peak fresh state. Then you're focused, you're firing on all cylinders. You could do the warm up with that lift. You can develop that movement pattern, attack it, right? It demands the most from your entire system, and it then drives everything else, right? A stronger squat means you can use heavier weights on lunges, for example. A bigger bench means the accessory pressing can carry more load. The main lift sets the ceiling for what follows, so it kind of primes you. I really love that approach, and it's a very traditional approach because it works. After the main lift, Resolute introduces the developmental lift. And this is a concept I've seen in many of the best programs where there's a variation of the main movement performed at lower intensity, but with a specific focus on technical or strength building to support the main lift. So what I want you to understand is in this program, you're not just doing a big bench press and then dropping to a very light rep, flat dumbbell bench. You're actually dropping the load just a little bit and doing sets of 8. So just to be clear, it's sets of 8. So it's an interesting rep range, but it's a fixed number of reps so that you can focus on progressing exactly that lift with those reps over time as a developmental variation. So for example, after heavy squats, you might do pause squats, right? After bench press, you might do close grip or incline. So it's very similar. And it reinforces the main lift without competing with it. And that helps also with fatigue and recovery. The developmental lift, the whole point of it is to address weaknesses in the main lift, but also add volume in a way that enhances instead of detracting from the primary goal. Because if, for example, your bench stalls because of weakness in your tricep, the close grip bench as your developmental lift attacks that limitation. And this is where customization can occur, right? If you're in Physique University and you're like, look, I'm really trying to work on this part of my body. Is this the best developmental lift? We could say, no, why don't you do this one instead, right? Why don't you do a paused or a Spoto press or a Larson press instead? And, a lot of programs, they either skip that approach or they just kind of move on to completely unrelated variations. And I'm not saying that's bad. Again, it depends on your goal. But I think this is a very intelligent approach we're trying to put in there where it's like, instead of a redundant stress, it's a complementary stress. So you get a little bit extra benefit, not so much fatigue built up, and you're attacking the main lift and supporting the main lift. So again, Resolute's available exclusively inside Physique University, which you can join using the podcast listener link in the show notes. If you do, it's still $27 a month, but you'll get a free custom nutrition plan. And then when you jump in, I can show you immediately where to find that training template. So another thing I think separates Resolute from a lot of the power building programs you see is the 5th day is a specialization day dedicated entirely to back and arms. And I think I love focusing on the back and arms because both from a physique perspective, they get neglected and people want to develop them. And from a health, symmetry, supporting your other lifts perspective, injury prevention, supporting your shoulders, for example, people don't realize the value of the back being strong to support your shoulders. So I'm not talking about the big rope-like back development you get from deadlifts. I'm talking about a little bit more direct work on your lats, your rhomboids, your rear delts, right? Kind of that mid to upper back area. And then of course, arms, men and women all like to have stronger, bigger looking arms. And although you hit arms both directly and indirectly throughout the week, you then can specialize on the weekend and hit them really hard as the very last part of the session. And so that's what I wanted to do with the power building here is really reserve some back and arm specialization for that last day, but you're still hitting the back and arms during the week. So you're getting a decent amount of volume, but it's spread out really nicely. And then you get that Saturday, or you get the Saturday and Sunday off if you do it 5 days straight, or you can take a day off in the middle. We have a couple ways to do that. We can show you in the template itself in Physique University if you join. There's not really a right or wrong because it's designed with like fatigue recovery built in, even if you do them 5 days straight. So the reason I like back strength is it also translates to your pressing strength. Your arm development translates to everything, also translates to your physique. And we know that performance is limited by your weakest component, and it's often hard to figure out what that is. But for a lot of lifters, that's back strength. That's also their arms, right? So, triceps are huge in a lot of movements, and they often get a little bit neglected, even though they come along for the ride with things like pull-ups and chin-ups and close grip bench and even rows. Hitting them directly is helpful. So we don't want weak backs. Strong backs are extremely helpful. Benching is supported by your lats for stability. Squats supported by your back in terms of, especially if you're doing, let's say, a safety squat bar. A lot of you are using that now. It actually really helps to have that strong back. Your upper back can round under load, so really strengthening that can help. So we're dedicating an entire session to back development and trying to remove that bottleneck and also help with the things people want, which is that look, right? And then we can't pretend that aesthetics don't matter, because they do. Big arms make everything look better, especially triceps. People think it's biceps, but it's the triceps. And they help fill out your shirt, and they are the difference between, for some people, looking like you lift and not. And so we throw it in there. Again, you can completely alter this if you want and say, I'm going to do leg specialization, understanding that there's going to be a fatigue cost depending on how you change the program. So again, I'm trying to do this intelligently with a purpose rather than random. And one of the things I wanted to think about here was deloads, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about how to use deloads and how and when and what they are. I think a really well-designed program is such that you almost never need to use a deload unless you feel the fatigue building up and then, I'll say intuitively, decide that you need that. The 3-week waves and the resets make it so that you have a very good chance of dissipating fatigue without needing deloads. Where the deload might be needed is if you're in a fat loss phase, don't have a lot of resources, you're not getting enough sleep, you're not eating enough, right? You have too much stress. So these are all things that would cause a deload simply because there are other variables outside the gym that are affecting your training. But also, after you run this for, let's say, 3 or 4 waves, so 9 or 12 weeks, you might find that you need a deload just because of built-up fatigue for your personal recoverability, or because the lifts are getting a little bit stale and you want to do a reset, and then you want to substitute some of the variations and accessories, or even the main lifts, right? Even the main lifts. And that's why I think I have written in there every 9 to 12 weeks if necessary. And when you do a deload, there's a couple different ways to do that beyond the scope of today's program. But for a lot of people, that's going to be dropping the intensity just a bit and cutting out some accessory work, right? Not a wholesale like elimination of days. Although in a 5-day power building program, that is another option. You can drop to maybe 3 days for that week. 3 or 4 days, just hit the main lifts and a variation and be done with it. There's a lot of different ways to do it. My goal is that you don't even need a deload. So we're not forcing you to take a deload. I'm not saying you have to take it. It's going to depend on, are you recovering well? Are you progressing? Are you feeling good? Why interrupt the momentum if all those things are good? That's my point. And you'll know when your performance stagnates or declines. And that's why we measure biofeedback. We track our lifts. We look at make sure the volume is right for us. Even when you start a program like this, even if you're fully resourced and nourished, the way it's written may be too much for you, or it may not be enough, right? I think the volume is pretty reasonable for the average person, but I can definitely see again in a fat loss phase or something like that where you would need to reduce it. So the deload, you want to keep training your nervous system, keep handling those movement patterns, but you're going to give your tissue a little bit more recovery if you need it. Right? If you need it. So I want you to think about program design here, because this episode is really about the design. Yes, I'm telling you about a template. I would love to have you in Physique University, because I know if you join, you're going to be extremely successful and learn finally how to lift the right way and progress, and then actually get the result you want, which is building muscle and then losing fat. But program design wise, a lot of lifters approach training like following a recipe, right? It's kind of interesting. It's like, here is a program and I'm going to follow it and I'm going to get the result. But we talk about engineering systems all the time, and the best systems here are adaptive. So all of my training templates, they're called templates because they're frameworks. It's not just here, follow this exact program. It's here's the template and why as a starting point. Now let's tweak based on how you're responding, what you need, what you like, just like with food. It's like if I gave you a meal plan as opposed to a meal framework, right? A meal framework might be, here's your calories, here's your macros, here's your micro goals, here's all the foods you like. Now you can mix and match the way you want it. Now, when it comes to training, people like a little more guidance and a little more structure right off the bat because it's a bit more challenging to understand from the overwhelming list of exercises how to put it together. So that's why I think these templates are a good launching off point. And the system does a lot of the thinking for you, which is, we kind of need that from a mental fatigue perspective. But then your thinking, or if we support you in doing that, is to adapt to your conditions and your recoverability. So it's not this like rigid protocol that's just going to break down from day one. And once you understand the principles, which by the way, in our training templates, one of the first sheets in there describes all the main principles and also some of the tactical things like warming up, then you can apply them to any template, any goal, right? If you want to focus more on strength, you could adjust the variation selection, or you can have more variations of the same, more variations on the main lifts in there. You could have lower rep ranges, right? If you want more size and you want to modify the rep ranges, if you're dealing with an injury, right, you can swap out lifts. There's a lot of ways to modify it. So it's not just following a program. It's, okay, I'm engineering my training around this template and building a skill that serves me for the rest of my lifting career. I love this stuff. Okay. So I'm excited about RESOLUTE. It's not just a great program or technically template. It represents an intentional way of thinking about strength and size, not as competing goals, but how to collaborate and putting them together, and then throw in some of that fun but helpful specialization as well, and make it adaptive, make it a bit auto-regulated, and help you systematically address the things that are lagging, but also allow the things that are progressing to continue progressing. Right? It's designed for real people, real lifters who have real lives, who are trying to combine everything into one in an intelligent, efficient way. It might not be the 99.999% optimal for each, but it's 95% optimal for both. So if you're looking for efficiency, that's where RESOLUTE delivers. And that's what thinking about systems brings to your training. And you'll get stronger, you'll build size, you'll get both, probably faster than you thought possible, probably faster than you've been able to in the past. So if you want to stop choosing between them, if you want to start building with a power building approach, RESOLUTE is waiting. We've got it already up and running inside Physique University. And if someone else is looking for a good program or a template, text this episode to a friend who's been struggling. I think they'll thank you for, the ideas, the programming principles, and you guys can probably put together this program yourself, I'll be honest, but we've got it all set up for you. So use the link in the show notes to join, get a free nutrition plan, come in and get RESOLUTE. And until next time, keep using your wits, lifting those weights, and remember, you don't have to choose between strong and jacked when you engineer a system for both. I'll talk to you next time here on the Wits and Weights podcast.